He walked into the room for a business meeting and stopped mid-sentence. There was a woman on the floor, pregnant, bruised, scrubbing marble on her knees like she had been stripped of every other option, because she had been. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. He only knew one thing, and it was hanging around her neck on a silver chain. A jade pendant he had pressed into a woman's hand at a Baltimore shipping dock 2 years ago. In the dark. With a promise. The men in that room had no way of knowing what they had done. No way of knowing who they had put on their knees. No way of knowing that the silence that just fell over that foyer was the last silence they would ever be comfortable in. If this story already has you feeling something, drop your city in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And stay until the end. Because the ending is why this story exists. She was 24 years old and she had learned to survive by staying invisible. Her name was Arya Mensah, born in Accra, raised on her mother's cooking and her mother's prayers. She had come to America on a student visa that expired before she could fix it, and the gap between that expired date and the present day had become the central fact of her life. Not who she was, not what she was capable of, just that gap, that administrative error that turned into a permanent shadow. She worked nights at the Port of Baltimore. Cargo documentation, cash pay, no questions asked. She cross-referenced shipping manifests against incoming containers, and she did it well. She was good at her job. She was good at most things. Nobody knew that because nobody looked. She met him on a Tuesday night in October. He was standing at the edge of the dock, alone. That was the first thing she noticed. That a man who looked like that was standing alone. He wore a long black coat. He had his hands in his pockets. He was looking out at the water with the face of someone who needed one quiet moment in a life that didn't offer many. She almost walked past him. She didn't. "The third crane from the left," she said, "has been making a grinding sound for 3 weeks. Maintenance keeps filing it under non-critical. I think they're wrong." He turned. His eyes were dark and very direct. Not the kind of eyes that performed attention, the kind that simply gave it. "You work here?" he said. "Documentation. You?" A pause. Something moved across his face. Not quite a smile, but the shape of one. Inspection. She found out much later what his inspection involved. That night she only knew he was interesting, and that he laughed. A real laugh, short and quiet, at the crane observation. And that they stood at the water's edge talking for 2 hours about things that had nothing to do with shipping. 7 evenings after that. Stolen hours between her shift and his business. They talked about Seoul and Accra and street food at 2 in the morning. He told her about a place in Itaewon where sundubu jjigae tasted like being forgiven for something. She told him about the specific exhaustion of being invisible in a country you were trying so hard to belong to. He listened, really listened. The kind of listening that made her feel located. On the 7th evening, he took the pendant from around his own neck. Pale jade, oval, silver chain. He pressed it into her palm and closed her fingers around it. "I have to go back to Seoul," he said. "There's a situation." "What kind of situation?" He looked at her, steady, certain. "The kind that doesn't wait. But I'm coming back for you, Arya. I need you to know that." She believed him, with her whole chest. She believed him. 3 days later, ICE ran a sweep at the terminal. 12 workers detained. Arya ran. She lost her job, her phone, most of her savings, and the sense that the future had any reliable shape. She disappeared into the city's underground, the network of people who knew how to exist in the gaps of a system designed to close around them. She kept the pendant. That was the only thing she kept. 6 months later, Julian Vane found her. He was charming. That was the first thing. The precise, calibrated charm of a man who had studied it like a skill. He found her at a community center where she was doing volunteer translation work, and he introduced himself as a philanthropist, a man who helped undocumented migrants navigate the legal system. He knew what questions to ask. He knew when to listen. He had a contact at a law firm, he said, a clear path to legal residency, a real chance. She was 24. She was exhausted. She was holding on to hope with both hands. She said yes to the first meeting, and the second, and the third. That was when he introduced what he called the trust element. "The attorney I work with takes personal risk with cases like yours," he told her. The restaurant was quiet. The wine was expensive. Everything about the evening was designed to feel like safety. He needs to know the people he's helping are committed, that they understand the relationship is reciprocal. Something in her pulled back, a quiet warning in her chest. The rest of her, desperate and tired and holding on, leaned forward. She was with him once. She told herself it was a decision. That was the only way she got through the next morning. The sponsorship never came. The attorney didn't exist. The following week, Vane stopped answering her calls. When she finally reached him, his voice had changed entirely. Clipped. Professionally cold. Done. "I'm not sure what you expected," he said. "These things take time." She understood then, with the kind of clarity that feels like cold water. She understood exactly what had happened, and exactly who she was dealing with. She did not fall apart. She went back to the community center. Quiet. Careful. She found 2 other women who'd been through Vane's program. One was working in his estate network. One couldn't talk about it without her hands shaking. Arya made a decision. She got herself hired at the estate. It wasn't hard. Vane's operation needed workers who had nowhere else to go. She spent 6 weeks watching, learning the layout, learning the rhythms of the house. And then one night, at 2 a.m, with a cracked phone and a steady hand, she found his ledger. Not digital, physical, leather-bound. Names, payments, transactions. 11 years of a trafficking operation documented in Vane's own handwriting, detailed and precise, the way arrogant men keep records, because they can't imagine the day someone uses them. She photographed every page. She knew exactly where to take it. The Meridian Migrant Rights NGO had a public profile, a clean website, a director named Ilara Vance, who had given 3 interviews about fighting exploitation in immigrant communities. It looked like a door. It was a trap. Ilara Vance was Julian Vane's sister. By the following morning, Detective Raymond Miller, 6 years on Vane's payroll, arrived at the address she had given the NGO. What he brought with him was not an arrest. It was a message. She was held while he explained her options. Undocumented. In possession of stolen property. The options were not options. The bruise along her jaw came from that morning. She woke up in the estate's staff quarters. No phone, no documents. A piece of paper outlining her debt. A fabricated number attached to the theft of the ledger to be repaid through domestic service at a rate designed to never clear. She was 4 weeks pregnant. Vane found out at 12 weeks. His response was precise. The child would be dealt with, or she would continue her service through and beyond the birth, her debt recalculated to include what he called maternity accommodation. He framed it as a choice. It was not a choice. She chose to continue. She chose it because she was still, underneath everything they had done to her, a woman who intended to survive. And the pendant, which she had hidden in the lining of her uniform because it was the one thing they hadn't found, reminded her every single day that she had once been someone a good man had promised to return for. She didn't let herself think about Ji-hoon directly. It was too much. But she kept the pendant, and keeping it was a kind of faith she couldn't name. She was 7 months pregnant the morning the front door opened. She was on her knees in the foyer. Section near the main staircase. The marble was cold through the fabric of her uniform. Her back ached. Her hands were raw. She kept her eyes down because looking up cost you things in this house. She heard the door. Multiple footsteps. Coordinated. The quality of movement that belongs to men who train together. She heard Vane doing his greeting, the warmth he performed for important visitors, the ease of a man who believed himself completely untouchable. She heard the footsteps stop. The silence that followed was different from any silence she had heard in this house. Park Ji-hoon had entered the Vane estate for a business meeting that no longer mattered. He had stopped 4 steps into the foyer. She was on the floor, her back to him, her shoulders carrying the particular tension of a woman who had learned to make herself small. She was visibly, heavily pregnant. The gray staff uniform, her hair tied back, a bruise along her jaw, yellow-green, about 10 days old, and around her neck, on a fine silver chain, was a pale jade pendant he recognized from 3 feet away. He stood motionless. 5 seconds. 7. Then he walked forward. He walked past Vane, past the associates, past the decorative table with the fresh flowers. He walked directly to where she was kneeling, and he stopped, and he looked down at the pendant at her throat, and something moved through his face that held every emotion at once and showed none of them cleanly. He reached down and grabbed the metal scrub bucket by its handle and threw it sideways in one motion. It hit the far wall like a gunshot. Water and suds across the imported stone, the bucket clanging, rolling, crashing into silence. Nobody in the room moved. Arya's head came up. She turned, still on her knees. She looked up at him, and her face moved through several things in quick succession. Shock, confusion, disbelief, and then something that cracked open like a wound healing in reverse. Ji-hoon, she said. Barely a whisper. He reached down with both hands and lifted her to her feet. Carefully, steady. He absorbed all of her weight without effort. When she was upright, he looked at her face. The bruise, the exhaustion, the 2 years of damage visible in her eyes. And then he removed his coat in one motion and wrapped it around her shoulders. He turned to face Julian Vane. Vane was a man who had survived 11 years in the space between legitimate business and organized crime. He was good at reading danger. He was reading it right now. The reading was not good. Mr. Park, he said, keeping his voice level. This is a staff matter. Quiet. One word. Not loud. The kind of quiet that fills a room more completely than shouting ever could. Vane went quiet. Ji-hoon looked at him. Then he looked at the wet marble floor, then back at Vane, the look of a man cataloging something for later. Who put the bruise on her face? Ji-hoon said. Not a question. Mr. Park, she is under a legally binding service contract. She is an undocumented... Ji-hoon moved. No flourish, no warning. He crossed the distance in 3 steps, reached into his jacket, and pressed the barrel of a matte black pistol to the center of Julian Vane's forehead. Vane's 2 associates moved. Ji-hoon's 4 guards moved first. Moved faster. Within 2 seconds, both men were against the wall, arms pinned. The room held its breath. Vane's face had gone completely white. Ji-hoon leaned in, close. His voice, when it came, was almost private. I want to pull this trigger more than I've wanted almost anything in my life, he said. I need you to feel the weight of what I'm choosing not to do right now. Behind him, Soo-han, 9 years at Ji-hoon's side, a man who chose every word with precision, spoke just above a whisper. Bureau surveillance, 2 vehicles on the north side, 6 days. If she witnesses a homicide. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. 1 second. He lowered the gun, slowly, with absolute control. He stepped back, straightened his shirt, looked at Vane with an expression that was, in its own way, more frightening than the gun had been, because it was patient. Every drop of water she wiped from this floor, Ji-hoon said, is a year I will take from your life. He let that land. She is mine now. I'm taking her. If anyone in this house tries to stop us, I will come back, and there will be no surveillance close enough to matter. He turned to Arya. His expression when it reached her was, startlingly, almost gentle. Can you walk? Yes, she said. Then walk with me. She walked with him. The car was black and quiet and moved through Maryland like the roads belonged to it. A blanket appeared. She pulled it over her shoulders and kept his coat on underneath. Nobody spoke for 40 minutes. Then he said, How long? 7 months, she said. How long were you in that house? About 12 weeks. Silence. She watched his profile in the moving light. Same face she'd memorized at the water's edge. Something in it had settled deeper, like stone under long pressure. I looked for you, he said. After I came back from Seoul, the terminal raid, no one knew where you went. I had people looking for almost a year. She didn't answer right away. There was too much inside that sentence to reach quickly. I wore the pendant every day, she said, even when everything else was gone. He turned and looked at her fully. Something moved through his face that wasn't control or composure. Something human and briefly unguarded. I know, he said. I saw it. The safe house was in Virginia. Large, quiet. A property behind a gate with a gravel drive and old oak trees pressing close on both sides. The inside smelled like wood and clean air. The staff spoke to her with directness that felt like respect. Her suite had real curtains, a bed that didn't list, a window with actual light. A doctor arrived within 2 hours. He examined her in English and Twi, gently and thoroughly. He declared her and the baby depleted but healthy. He said the word rest like it was medicine. She let herself hear it. Over the next 3 weeks, Ji-hoon began what his people called the erasure. His tech team worked from a room she never saw. They moved through every system that held her illegal status and took it apart. Immigration records, Vane's debt documentation, Miller's police files. Thread by thread, they replaced it. With a legal history that had always existed. A woman who had been here all along. Simply invisible to the wrong systems. The new passport, when it was finished, would read Arya Park. He hadn't told her that yet. In the evenings, he sat with her. He brought food from a Korean restaurant 2 towns over. Sundubu jjigae, because she had told him once, and he had held on to it for 2 years. She asked him questions. He answered. She talked about her mother's garden in Accra, and he listened the same way he had always listened, completely, without performing it. He didn't push her about Vane, didn't ask for details she hadn't offered. He knew enough. And what she needed was not to relive it. What she needed was to stop. She told him herself one evening when she was ready. She kept it factual. The sponsorship lie. The one night. The pregnancy. Vane's response when he found out. Her hands were tight in her lap. She watched Ji-hoon's face as she spoke. His face didn't change. When she finished, he was quiet. The child is yours, he said. And mine, if you'll allow that. The biological fact means nothing to me. She looked at him. He won't be the father of your child, Ji-hoon said. Simple. Final. Not a claim. A correction. She cried. Not with grief. With release. The fear she had been carrying, that the child's origin would be a wall between her and anything good, broke apart quietly, without drama, like something that had never deserved its own weight. He didn't try to stop the tears. He just sat with her while they ran their course. That was exactly right. She knew that was exactly right. The storm came in from the Atlantic on a Thursday in late November. Arya had been having contractions since mid-afternoon. By midnight, they weren't irregular anymore. Ji-hoon was on the phone with the doctor when Soo-han found him. Soo-han's voice was the way it got when what it carried was urgent, flat, and precise. Every word chosen. They're coming, He said. 6 vehicles. Vane, Thorne, Miller, Alara Vance. Someone in the network talked. They know where we are. Ji-hoon looked at the door of Arya's room. Behind it, he could hear her. That sound organized everything else into secondary importance. He finished the call, gave the doctor the address, told him to come regardless of the roads. Then he turned to Suhan. She doesn't hear gunfire, Ji-hoon said. Whatever happens in this house tonight doesn't reach her room. Understood? Understood. The child arrives safely. That is the first priority. Everything else is second. He gave his orders. Arya was moved to the most interior room. Stone wall on the north side, no exterior windows, 2 reinforced doors. 2 guards stayed with her. The doctor was routed through the back entrance the moment he arrived, and Ji-hoon went to the front of the house to meet what was coming. The first exchange happened at the perimeter. Dark. Driving snow. It was brief. 2 of Vane's 6 men became unavailable within 90 seconds. Vane, Thorne, Miller, and Alara made it to the main building. They did not find what they expected. Ji-hoon found Vane in the main hall, phone torch cutting through the dark. Searching for the staircase, he heard Ji-hoon before he saw him, or felt him. The way you feel a pressure shift before a door opens. He raised his weapon. Ji-hoon moved past it. 2 seconds. Vane was on the floor. The weapon was elsewhere. Ji-hoon crouched down. He studied Vane's face with the focus of a man arriving at a conclusion he had already reached. Then he reached past him and picked up the mop leaning against the wall. He dropped it in Vane's lap. The vault, Ji-hoon said. Take me there. You're going to kill me, Vane said. Yes, but first you're going to understand something. He walked Vane to the vault room at the back of the ground floor. Climate-controlled. Fluorescent backup lighting. The smell of recycled air and old money. He told Vane to clean the floor. The floor was already clean. That wasn't the point. Vane knelt. He scrubbed with shaking hands. The mop handle was too long for him, and his knees hurt on the stone, and his fingers were bleeding before 10 minutes had passed. He understood, kneeling there, exactly what the point was. He felt it in his body. The reduction of a person to a function. The deliberate removal of dignity. The thing he had done to Arya on that marble floor for 12 weeks. He understood it now the only way he was capable of understanding anything. Ji-hoon waited until he was certain. Then he did what he had come to do. Alara Vance and Detective Miller were found together in the East Wing, moving fast through the dark. Suhan had anticipated this. The shipping container, moved onto the property 2 days earlier, a contingency, was where they ended. Their phones taken, their credentials catalogued, their legal documents, every piece of power they had wielded over Arya, bagged and sealed for the federal evidence package already being assembled. The container door closed on the legal architecture of their lives. It would not be where their story ended, but it was where their power did. Marcus Thorne was the last. He was in the kitchen when Ji-hoon found him. Fluorescent backup lighting, the smell of stainless steel and old coffee. Thorne had a weapon. Ji-hoon had set his aside, not from recklessness, from intention. Thorne swung first. What followed was not long, but it was thorough. Ji-hoon fought with the controlled focus of a man who knows exactly what he is doing and why. Thorne was the one who had delivered Arya's discipline, who had carried out the daily physical mechanics of her suffering, who had looked at a pregnant woman and seen a management problem. When it was over, Ji-hoon was standing and Thorne was not. Ji-hoon straightened his shirt. He was breathing harder than usual. He looked down without triumph, without pleasure. His expression was the look of a man who has corrected an error and is already thinking about what comes next. A king protects his own, he said quietly, to the still kitchen. You were just a mistake I was correcting. He went to find Arya. The doctor arrived at 12:47, 40 minutes after the storm peaked. He moved fast and professionally through the interior room. Generator light. The smell of antiseptic and melting snow tracked in from outside. Two of the house's women assisted him. Ji-hoon stood outside the closed door. He didn't pace. He was still. But this stillness was different from the stillness in Vane's foyer. That had been the stillness of a predator. This was the stillness of someone holding themselves together at the edge of something enormous. At 2:16 in the morning, he heard the baby cry. Clean, strong, declarative, present in the world without apology. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. When the door opened and the doctor came out and said both mother and child were well, Ji-hoon nodded once and said thank you in the voice of a man who has been holding structural integrity together by significant effort of will. He went in. Arya was propped against the headboard, her hair loose around her face, the exhaustion of the night visible in every line of her body. She was holding the baby, a girl, small and dark and new, her face still creased from the work of arriving. The baby was sleeping with the absolute commitment that newborns bring to sleep. Ji-hoon pulled a chair to the side of the bed and sat. He looked at the baby for a long time. "Do you want to hold her?" Arya said. He looked up. She placed the child in his arms with the careful transfer new mothers learn instinctively. He held her, this small, entirely unbothered person, with a steadiness that came from somewhere very deep in him. The baby slept on. The storm outside had dropped to a low wind. Snow still coming but slow now. Soft. The kind that accumulates quietly, rather than announcing itself. The room was warm. The generator hummed. The doctor had gone. The guards were outside. Just the three of them. Ji-hoon reached into his jacket with his free hand and produced a passport. Dark blue cover. Gold lettering. He placed it on the bed beside her without speaking. She picked it up, opened it. Her photograph looked back at her. Clean, formal, real. The name on it was Arya Park. She turned it over, ran her thumb across the embossed cover. Opened it again like she needed to confirm what she'd seen. She looked up at him. "Every system that ever said you didn't belong here," Ji-hoon said quietly, "was wrong. I corrected it." The passport was extraordinary, but it wasn't the passport that broke her open. It was his face, the way he was looking at her, not at the baby, not at the room, but at her. Open in a way she hadn't seen it before. The last layer of composure gone, and underneath it something simple and enormous and patient. Something that had been waiting a long time to be seen. "I'm sorry I didn't come back sooner," he said. His voice was lower than usual, rough at the edges. "I need you to know I looked." "I know," she said. "I should have looked harder." "Ji-hoon?" He looked at her. "You came," she said. "That's the whole story. You came." He looked down at the baby sleeping in his arms, then back at her. At the pendant at her throat. Returned to its place, where it had always belonged. At the woman who had survived 2 years of everything a system and 4 men could do to her and come through not broken but refined, stripped of every illusion and every limitation. "I love you," he said. Simple. The tone of a man stating a fact he has known for a long time. "I loved you at the docks. I loved you through every month of looking. And I love you more now than I have words for. Which is unusual for me, because I generally have words." She laughed. A real one. It surprised her with its own fullness. The kind of laugh that can only come from a body that has recently been holding grief and has just been given permission to put it down. "I love you," she said. "I loved you when you gave me the pendant. I loved you when you walked through that door. And I love you right now, sitting in this room holding our daughter." The word "our" settled between them. Clean and final and chosen. The baby stirred, made a small sound, some ambiguous opinion about the world, settled back into sleep. Outside, the snow was slowing. The sky was clearing from the west. the way it always does. Not all at once, but piece by piece, the clouds pulling back to show what had been there all along. Ji-hoon Park held his daughter in his arms and looked at the woman who had kept a jade pendant for 2 years in the lining of a gray uniform in a house that had tried to erase her. He looked at her like she was the most important thing in any room he had ever stood in, because she was. If this story moved you, drop your city below. We read every comment. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe and hit the bell. The next one is already coming.